You're listening to another episode of the Fredericksburg Strong Podcast. This is a local forum to inform and entertain our community, discuss local news, promote small businesses, and celebrate our hometown heroes with a little dose of humor to keep you entertained. Our mission is simple: to keep Fredericksburg strong. Today's podcast is powered by Pohanka Nissan and Pohanka Hyundai of Fredericksburg. And now, here's your host, Tim Pohanka.
Good morning, everybody. It's Tim Pohanka, and I am here with another one of our episodes. We're talking about digital transformation today, and I'm very, very, very lucky to have my guest here. I have Erik Qualman. Erik is an author and a motivational speaker, and you told me before you're a futurist?
Yeah, some people call me a futurist, but obviously if I got everything right, I'd have a couple jets in my backyard. So we're better at predicting overall trends versus predicting. So overall trend being, hey, search is going to be big, like 25 years ago, but not being able to identify, no one can do this. If they do, run away from them. They think they can, or have them show you their jets. Is that who's going to win? Google, Excite, Dogpile, Lycos, Yahoo. But you knew that search would be big.
Well, obviously search has been huge, but you've also written a lot of books. You've written books. Socialnomics, Digital Leader, Digital Leader, and What Happened in Vegas Stays on YouTube, which is a great little slogan there. And I had an opportunity to listen to you at an event with Nissan. And a lot of what you said really got to me. And I wanted to start with word of mouth and what that means in the digital age.
Yeah, it's interesting. When you look at socialnomics, all that term means is word of mouth on digital steroids, or word of mouth is now world of mouth. Because especially in the industry that you're in, we talk about Nissan, is your best customers, your best teammates, your best partners have always come from word of mouth. The issue with word of mouth historically is it didn't really scale, and it wasn't as accurate as it is today. So now you have more accuracy with word of mouth because it's digital, and now you have that scale. Because before, if you had a good experience, you could tell 6 people. Now the data shows that you'll tell 84 people.
So when I look at it, though, for us in our industry now, you've got so many different places that word of mouth gets presented. And in the automotive space, you've got your Google review, you've got a dealer rater, cars.com, Yelp, you've got items that go on. I mean, actually, if there's a site out there, they're trying to collect these reviews. SureCritic. What becomes a legitimate source of a review versus one that people can start to get confused with and may go, hey, is this a paid for site or what goes on?
Yeah, I mean, in time, they'll always get better. So in the short term, there's always nefarious activity. But as you get that volume and scale, then the trusted sources start to rise. And so whether you're talking about reviews and ratings, or if you're talking about, let's say, the New York Times or bloggers, is that it's a beautiful age which we live in, because if you become the trusted source, then you can come out of nowhere and become that trusted source. And people that take that short-term money gain, let's say XYZ publication puts out something that's not true, that'll hurt them long-term. So essentially, that's the beauty of socialnomics, is that you can see who's posting what, and over time you can see, is it accurate or is it not? And so those that are trusted will win. So if you think about the big 4, like Amazon, if you look at Google, if you look at Apple, and you look at Amazon, and you look down the line of those 4, it's really about who are we going to trust that'll win that race? Because they're all kind of colliding at some point in the same markets. And so who do we trust with our data? Who do we trust with our personal information? And the same holds true, obviously, historically, with what you've done at the dealership, is if I trust this team at the dealership year after year, when I go to get my new car, I'm going to go back to that dealership.
So you brought up data, and I wasn't going to go here, but I think it's a good point. We've got a lot of fear of data, whether it's federal or local. You've got all these companies, trying to get data from us. At what point should that fear of data, how much of that fear of data is real?
It's real, especially when you think in an older school mindset, older school not being a bad thing, just like the world as it was. And so I grew up in a world to where privacy was protected. It was important to have that locked behind closed doors. And we're moving into a world rapidly, as the CEO and now chairman of Google, Eric Schmidt, says, we live in a post-privacy world, meaning that most data is now fully transparent, which you could argue both good or bad. But if you think about the more transparent you can be as a world, the better off you are. But that's getting into like a whole nother philosophical debate. In terms of data that matters, especially for your listeners, you hear big data. Really don't care about big data. What you care about is small data. All of us love telling people what we like and what we don't like. And we're doing that more and more online, what we like and what we don't like. So to effectively use that data and make it small is to surprise and delight that customer, that teammate, because now you know more about that person because of what they posted. So a lot of the information that's out there is someone at their own free will posted, I like this. I was at Starbucks and I like this pumpkin spice latte. And so now that data is out there and you make it small and actionable, you can surprise and delight your customers, your partners, and your teammates. So that's what the exciting thing about data is. Or I'm actually on the advisory board at data.world. And what they're doing is if you break down these silos, if you open up the data, so if there's 8 of the world's top doctors that are working on cancer treatment, historically that data is closed off. It's in a silo. But if you can open up that data, which is what data.world's doing, think about data.world as a Facebook for data, is that they open up those silos. All of a sudden, you might get a cure for cancer a lot quicker because 3 people have different pieces of that puzzle that then can be put together. So data can be confusing, but at the end of the day, it's all about relationships if you use it well. And so it's really the more you can open that data up, the better off you are. On an individual level, like when you think about the book, What Happens in Vegas Stays on YouTube, it's up to you on where your level of privacy, how much do you want to be private, how much, it's a risk reward scenario. So people get upset that Facebook's sending you ads that are specific to you, but you can make the argument, do you want to get an ad that's not specific to you, that's not of value to you? That doesn't seem to make sense, but it's to each their own on how much their willingness on that data. But understand that when you use a tool like Facebook, it's free, but it's not free because you're the product, right? You are the product. You're the data. And so you're using this at your own free will. So if you don't like it, just get off it. So don't get upset with Facebook or these other social platforms. It's an option for you to be on them. And it's a free platform for a reason, because you're the actual product.
So do you think that Facebook and some of these social media sites have a responsibility to monitor some of the content that's on their site?
Man, you always have to take it from inside the company perspective as well. And I always like to look back as a futurist. The best predictor is not best predictor, but you've always got a lot of these movies are the same movie, just different actors and actresses. So if you look at the phone lines, and the mafia is using the phone lines back in the 60s, the 50s, it would go to court and it'd say, is AT&T responsible for monitoring all the activity that happens on their lines? And the answer was no. And so it gets into a philosophical debate, but the question is, the platforms always, then all of a sudden you go, well, let's Facebook, then you've turned it over to a privately held company to let them monitor, and it's up to them on how they monitor, right? So then that becomes a slippery slope as well. Because let's say the CEO of Facebook is heavily skewed one way or another in a political system. Then all of a sudden you've now unleashed them to basically censor any content as they see fit.
So how do you? You bring up a very good point in that regard. How do you see is there an ability to do that Or do you think Congress is going to try to jump in and do that based upon whichever party is in power?
Yeah, they're definitely going to try to jump in. The issue is they can't keep up. So this TikTok thing's interesting because that's the first time that the U.S. is essentially acting like China in the sense that China blocks everything because they want it's called the Great Wall of China, actually, the Great Digital Wall of China. And they do it because they want to make sure that their Chinese-owned Google version, which is Baidu. So Baidu goes and looks at Google and basically tries to replicate it. And they want their Chinese-owned companies to excel. And so they block all these external companies from really playing in China. And so for the first time in history, the US has kind of done the same thing with this recent thing with TikTok. For those not familiar with it, it's one of the fastest growing social networks. It happens to be Chinese-owned. And so they required TikTok is going to get banned in the US unless it became owned by a US company. So it quickly was broken up, and then now it's partly owned by Walmart and Oracle, and it's its own entity. So that gets kind of interesting from a standpoint. That's the first time that we've kind of acted like China in terms of blocking things, and it's whether it's true or not, it's under the guidance that it was a security issue for the United States government. But again, that's the first time that it's occurred. But I think for your audience, the key is not to be afraid of this stuff. This stuff's moving so fast. Congress can try to do what they can do, but you've seen like when Zuckerberg goes to Congress, they don't even know what a social network is, half these guys. It's not their fault. They just didn't grow up with it. And so it's hard to legislate something you don't truly understand. So in this instance, whether it's who's responsible, whether it's Apple for turning over phones during a crime, or whether it's Facebook has to monitor if someone posts something that's nefarious or something that's untrue on Facebook, I think at the end of the day, all those things, they're an attempt to help and to do good, but they haven't been effective historically. And so this is, again, the same movie, just different actors and actresses. That what has been most effective is people being accountable and just learning and getting better, and basically the free market in this instance kind of taking over. So, but it's tricky. It's tricky when you think about elections. You don't know what's true and what's not true. And so I think in time, humans are amazing, so they can quickly adapt and they'll learn, who do I trust? This came from this source, this came from this source. Here's the people or organizations that I trust to get my information.
So you bring up, you're talking about different organizations and how things have evolved. When you look at the past and to where we're going in the future, there are all sorts of new products. You mentioned TikTok. We've gone from MySpace through Facebook. You look at Instagram, Pinterest. Where and you keep talking about, that was the last year's technology. That was the last year's thing. What's the difference between ones that will have staying power or ones that are just fad online places?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And I always say overinvest in your people and meaning your teammates and also your customers, and overinvest in the trend. Don't invest in the tool itself, because those are going to change. And you've seen it, like Facebook is now dominated primarily by an older generation. And then that's why they bought Instagram and bought WhatsApp, which isn't even talked about, but that's probably one of the newer ones that's going to be huge. That'll be on everyone's radar, just like TikTok. And so it's impossible to predict what's the next one that hits, but you can do a good job of predicting the trend. All of these tools, whether it's Facebook, MySpace to Facebook, or really it's Friendster to MySpace to Facebook to Instagram to Snapchat to TikTok, is keep your investment light on the tools themselves and overinvest in your customer and overinvest in your teammates. Meaning that your customer, don't be dependent on the platform, develop that relationship with the customer so that then they move from a Snapchat to a TikTok, that you're there with them and they're there with you. So you've already have that relationship. It's not dependent on the platform itself. Because no one can predict which platform's going to stay and which one's going to be the new one. But you can, if you put that time in to get that customer, it doesn't matter which platform change, because that relationship's built with you.
So when you bring that up, which brings me to something that I've always been interested in, and I would love to get your view on this. when we look at an automotive space, we talk about tier one marketing, which is what the manufacturer would do. Tier two marketing, which would be what a group of dealers would do together, a group of Nissan dealers or a group of Hyundai or a group of Honda. Tier three marketing is what a dealership would do. And there's a growing trend to talk about tier four marketing, which is what the individual salesperson would do. Do you think that a sales consultant today, or anyone starting in any business today, if they're looking at employees from the grassroots level, do you think they're in a better position to take advantage of what you're talking about in looking at the different trends, because they can be more nimble than, say, a company?
In a lot of instances, yes. And actually, for all individuals, there's something new that's kind of risen up in the last 10 years in terms of at least the name of it. And so I talk about this at length in the book Digital Leader, but all of us have what's called the digital stamp. And so that's a fancy term for your personal brand, which is a new fancy term for your reputation. But these personal brands are huge because they travel with you. And so a digital stamp, and your personal brand's primarily online, especially now with the pandemic, is that we're 100% virtual. And so your entire reputation is almost your digital reputation. Now, in a regular non-pandemic world, I always call it Flintstones and Jetsons. You need to have both. You can't replace face-to-face. That when time and distance are an issue, this is when you use digital. So even though I'm a digital guy, I'm a huge face-to-face person. You can't replace that. But when we live in a pandemic as well, your digital stamps comprise of two things. It's comprised of your digital footprint. That's anything you upload about yourself. And that's comprised, more importantly, of the digital shadow. That's what other people post about you online. And so those two things together, your footprint, what you post, plus your shadow, what other people post about you, and we talked about ratings a little bit. So for organizations, that's a big component of it. But that comprises your digital stamp. So it's about producing and protecting your best digital stamp. So to answer your question, is it yes, the individual, because they have the relationships, right? And so individuals that understand that I've got more power than ever before because I'm developing these relationships. And all of us, whether we think it or not, we're in sales. If you think about it, if you're trying to get money raised for your local school, you're in sales. If your kid's trying to convince you why they should stay up till 11 o'clock, they're in sales. If you're trying to convince your kid to eat broccoli, you're in sales. But externally, when you think about the sales approach, is that it's all based on relationships, which is all based on your reputation, which again is now called your personal brand, and is now also called your digital stamp. The most modern version of it's your digital stamp. So all that relationship building, whatever you're trying to do, it's going to help you. And so the individual can definitely move faster. That's why you have a lot of companies using these influencers, because they go, why do we spend time and money building up credibility when this person already has credibility in that sector? This is the person that everyone looks to in that sector for influence. And so that's why you're seeing that huge rise of influencer marketing.
So when you bring up the face-to-face and you're talking about the Jetsons and the Flintstones, which is a really good analogy, COVID has changed and the pandemic has changed so many things. Where is it that you think that where's that balance going to land? And how does a company, or how do individuals, maybe not just even in a business setting, but even in a personal setting, how do they find that middle ground, or that right ground that's going to give them that right balance?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because everyone is so different, every organization and every individual. And so there's a lot of talks that I'm involved in, because before COVID hit, before this pandemic, before everyone was working virtually 100%, there's a lot of companies that tested working Fridays off, that tested only working 3 days during the week, and it wasn't working well. So the question becomes, and we've seen it work well during the pandemic, we're starting to see other people say it was working well at the beginning, now it's not. And so the question is, why was it working well at the beginning? Was it because there was nothing else for us to do? The people were able to focus, it was new, and then they got tired of it? Or as we come out of this, my opinion is you're going to see a mix. You're going to see some learnings to where, let's say it was always 5 days in the office. There's going to be companies that say, yep, we're going to go 3 days in the office, 2 days virtual. But the bigger question is, historically, one thing for sure, we call him a Tom Brady employee, right? You have a Tom Brady. the greatest of all time, the GOAT. And so you've got a lot of, if you have a Tom Brady on your team, they're going to excel no matter where they're working. Virtual, remote, on the moon, it doesn't matter. But as a larger organization, the question becomes, historically, they don't make really overt exceptions for top performers, because then it causes a little ripple effect of discontent across the whole organization. And obviously a football team of all Tom Brady's isn't a good football team, right? You got to play to your strengths. And so it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But as we come out of this, I think there's going to be adjustments for sure. We're not going to go back to work. It's going to go forward to work, because the new world's going to look totally different than the one we came in through this. There'll be some similarities, but it's going to be a whole different world. So, but I'm curious to know, just obviously in the space that you're in, what are you all seeing? Like at the beginning, was it hit hard, and then all of a sudden now it looks like sales are back, at least across the board, to kind of pre-COVID levels? And how does it work, especially when it's such a face-to-face driven business? Like, what do you see as some changes that come out of it?
I think that's what happens is that dealerships that are prepared to work their process and be flexible in their process are the ones that are doing well. As an industry as a whole, we're doing fairly well because there has been some shortages in certain cars and auctions and production. So when you have that shrinkage of inventory, obviously there's a better profit margin. But when you look at the dealerships that are selling and doing a good job selling, I think it's the ones that are prepared to be flexible in their process. Dealerships that are siloed, to use a word that you used about, this is how we do things, this is only how we're going to do things, this is how we've done things for 100 years, that's what we're going to do. I think they're the ones that are in trouble. Now, we have been in business for 100 years. This is actually our 101st year in operation.
That's awesome. Congrats.
Yeah. But we don't take that look. And there's a lot of other dealers that we're associated with that don't take that look, where you're willing to invest in digital opportunities, where you're willing to look at the ability to let people sign contracts from home, or you're looking at doing video chats, or you're looking at doing virtual test drives, or you're even willing to take a car to their house, or you're willing to bring the car here. Those are important. And then things that you do at the dealership have been important. We built, or it's actually being completed, we have we're calling it an outdoor showroom and waiting room that's being built for customers who don't want to be inside. You have to look at those trends, you have to look at what makes people comfortable, and you have to be willing to adapt to that. People still want that face-to-face. Everyone can tell me that they want to buy a car online. We've experienced it. The buying of the car online has not really taken off. Customers' journey on that process online has. So in 20 years, will customers be comfortable buying cars online? Probably. But are they ready now? No. So you're having to work that journey with the client. You can't just immediately go right to that end game and go, hey, we're going to Carvana you, we're going to deliver the car to you. If that was successful, we'd all be doing it. It's only successful for a certain segment of the population. So it still goes back to the individual dealership and what they're willing to do. Sales consultants that are willing to be flexible, dealerships they're the ones that I've seen that have been the more successful.
No, that's great. And then are you seeing, because there's some dealers that are progressive like you and some of your peers, to where like texting. So you might text the dealer, hey, this is the car I know I want because I've driven it. It's the car I'm in. I just want a new one. Can you give me the best price? To where one dealer would say, well, we've been doing it for years. Don't give them a price. That's good. Like, give them the high one. Get them in here. Let's talk to them. And then others, are you seeing that others are getting more progressive and are giving the best price via the text?
I think best price is always kind of a hard one to use. I'd say a transparent price is probably the best one to use. Because if someone ever tells you this is my best price, that's one that you need to be very concerned about. If they're telling you this is their transparent price, that's the one that you want to really be focused on. A best price is something that anyone's going to tell you to come in.
Okay.
Transparent pricing is one that they are willing to sell that vehicle for, and they're willing to back it up by, hey, this is what it's going to be. So to answer your question, I think that there's a lot of dealers out there that are really learning that is an acceptable solution. It started with trade-ins. Trade-ins before, you wouldn't tell someone what their trade is worth because you wanted to control that process. Now, with so many different places that a consumer can go to get a trade-in value, it makes sense to tell them, okay, this is what it is. Then you looked at dealers that said, oh, we don't want to tell them if they're going to be approved for a loan because you want to control that process. Again, there's so many places someone can go to get approved for a loan. So you might as well tell them what that's going to be. So then when you go to the price, which is where you just got to, that still has some level of ambiguity because of regional issue concerns, rebates people qualify for, they don't qualify for. So that's where you're seeing some of that apply. I think a dealership that starts to get in that space has to be able to do the best job of qualifying their client to find out what they do and do not qualify for, to get them that price as quickly as possible. That's where you're going to see those types of winners and losers. The only other way that this would go would be if everyone was at one price. And I just don't see the American public buying into that philosophy anytime soon.
No, that makes sense. It's a progressive approach as well. And then what are you seeing in terms of sales? Are there some salespeople that are just excelling in virtual selling where they go, they're pretty good, but in virtual, they're killing it. They're absolutely doing amazing. Is there any pattern that you're seeing of what they do?
You're always going to have different people excel at different components. If you've got someone that's shy when they're first talking to somebody, when they walk in face to face, this opportunity in the pandemic has given those who are more adept in the digital space to be able to reach out. For some reason, a video is easier for them to do than a face-to-face handshake. But I think all of them, if you're generally a personable person, and those are the people that succeed more in sales, cream rises to the top, and success leaves clues, and people learn from other people. So yes, the answer is yes. There are some that do, but if you're good at sales, you'll figure it out.
No, that makes sense. And how about the culture? How do you keep the culture when everyone's remote when you're used to being in there face to face?
It's funny you should say that. To keep a culture, it goes back to the grassroots. It goes back to your philosophy. It goes back to your core. What is it that you're going to focus on every day, which is going to be a good segue to your book. But if your focus is going to be making phone calls, making contact points, remembering that clients can be reached out to via chat, via text, via email, via phone call, via snail mail. If you get people constantly focusing on those contact points and how clients wish to be responded to or what they're looking for, that's what makes you successful.
No, that makes sense.
So let's go back and talk about your book, because and the reason why I want to do this is two reasons. Number one, you've been described as the Peter Drucker of the the new millennia of Peter Drucker, which was my great uncle who just passed away, who was chairman of our company that saw us to our 100th anniversary. He was a huge fan of Peter Drucker. But one of the other owners of our company always goes around and says, "What are you focused on? What's your focus? What's your thought process?" So let's talk about your new book. When people are looking at focus, what is so important about it?
It's so important because it's interesting, because I went down the journey of focus because I was struggling a little bit with it as well. And so what I wanted to do was figure out, okay, if I'm struggling with this and I somewhat control my own time because, I write books and kind of get out there in front of people. And so I wanted to figure out, okay, I'm struggling with this. And I started to ask some of the top automotive minds, and I've got the video on now. So finally, so the top automotive minds in the world, as well as whether it's a stay-at-home dad or a school teacher. And over time, I figured out, wow, everyone's wrestling with focus. And so that's why I took the project on to figure out, hey, let's look at the research, let's industrial science and combine it with some street science, me, the guinea pig, and figure out how do we do this? Because it's the key, it's the ultimate key to success. Because you think about the most important resource we have, any of us, and it's shared because it's all the same for all of us, no matter how successful you are, is what am I focused on? And so the result of the book was, how do we focus on the big things rather than the busy things? So a lot of times people ask how you're doing. You're like, I'm good, but I'm crazy busy. If you're saying that, a lot of us do it. I say it myself. That's why I went through the project myself, and I still do it. It's not every day is perfect, but you want to avoid those days as much as possible. You want to focus on the big, not the busy.
You know, it's funny you should say, because it does tie into what I was just saying, is that, you know, when you look at a salesperson, there's so much time you can focus on the busy work, and you miss the big picture of what goes on. And you know, I have an expression: either you can control the day, or the day controls you. And I think focus is an important part that brings that back together. If you were to give four or five real important things for people to do every day to work on their focus, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I'll give them one, and then I'll give you the top 3 learnings I got from the book. But the thing you should do, because to focus, it's about like, just what's the one thing that I can do well that makes everything else either easier or necessary. And you know what it is. Just write it down the night before or first thing in the morning. And I've been doing this as much as I can. And again, you're going for progress, not perfection. That's the other thing a lot of us fall into, their type A personalities that are listening to this, is that when you take on something new, your first thought process, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be perfect. And what you want to do is just go for progress, not perfection. So the one thing you do each and every day to improve your focus, it'll help you right away, is just write down what's the one thing that if I do it well, it makes everything else either easier or unnecessary, meaning that you can check things off your to-do list because they're not important if you crush this one thing. And it doesn't matter what you're doing. So let's say that you're in the local community and it's outside of your job, that you're just raising money for a school. And that school has an annual gala, and 80% of the funds come from that gala. But you do 100 other things. You do a Chick-fil-A night. You do all these other little things throughout the year. Guess what? Your one thing is that gala. So all your resources should be pointed at that, because if you crush the gala, it covers everything. Whereas if you crush the 99 other things and you don't crush the gala, you don't make your big hairy goal, right? And so it's really about understanding, and we know what it is a lot of times each day. It's the thing we don't want to do, because it probably requires the most brain power. The one thing that we need to do is sometimes we're putting that off because we know it's not easy. If it was easy, it'd already be done. And so it's really about attacking, like you mentioned, you know, I love your phrase about making sure that you control the day before it controls you. We like to say attack the day before it attacks you.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Same thing.
So now a couple of, you know, one other thing that goes into it is you can focus on the small stuff.
Yeah.
Or what I would say is, well, actually, I'll give you another great one that someone told me is, you know, do you want to keep putting out the fire, or do you want to kill the arsonist? So
that's good.
It is. It's one that's stuck with me. I will tell you that. It's one I use quite frequently. But when you start to look at all of these things that go on, are there certain things that people should go, hey, I need to really find the root cause of the problem, not dealing with all of these symptoms that are going on? And how do you do that?
Yeah, here I'm going to suggest, again, I'm trying to give a key tactical takeaway. It's going to give people some heart palpitations when you do this, and it should. Most top performers, 90% have to-do lists, which is good. You have your to-do list, right? What I want you to do is look at your to-do list right now. Just look at it and write in front of it, not. Just write the word not. And then go down that list and just take one item off there and then put it over on the left. That's your new to-do list. And so obviously I'm kind of pushing the envelope there. I say put not, but you might want to put not yet on that list. And so that's a key learning too, because our brain's trying to complete any unfinished task. So if you have a long list, which I did, of to-dos, even if I'm having a good day, like Peter Drucker, right? Focus on the important versus the urgent. most of us focus on the urgent versus the important, but let's say we're having a good day and we're focused on the number one item. If we've got a long list of to-dos, our brain is actually, us not knowing it, is thinking about item number 37 because it's not completed. So just by having on a separate list, you can call it your not to do or your not yet list, because you might eventually get to it once you complete the other task. That's huge. And then with teams, we saw it firsthand because we do a bunch of stuff, just like any company. And once we put all the resources around the number one thing we needed to do, record amount of sales in a record year for the entire organization once we did that. So it was funny because when we did that month, I was concerned if it didn't work, we weren't going to write the book because it's like, oh, this doesn't work. And so it's very nerve-wracking going into that month. We wanted to pick something that was measurable and also would allow me for the next 11 months to have the luxury to kind of test these other things, knowing that we kind of took care of the most important thing in that first month and had the whole team focused on it. And teams get excited too, because if everyone's around the same thing, instead of rallying around 8 different objectives, if you're around that one objective, and then you can kind of see it visually, most of us are visual learners, then it's huge. Actually, it didn't make the book, but Nissan of Mexico, under their leadership, they actually increased their sales by 25% because they used a doll called the Daruma. And so they're just focused on, hey, we've got to get here. And then the Daruma doll, the way it works is it's pretty ugly looking doll, but you start off with, once you set the initiative, you color in one eye. And then when you complete the initiative, you color in the other. But they mailed that to every dealership across Mexico. And so everyone was focused on that one thing.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that, because I'm sitting here and, you know, on the back of my notes for you, I've got a to-do list of things that I have to do. And I find myself bouncing from item to item to item to item, giving each one like, 10 minutes of my time, 20 minutes of my time. And I have not accomplished anything on this list. And after talking to you, I'm sitting there going, maybe I should just sit down and just knock out one and get past my short attention span theater and really just stay focused on that. Because I think that's something that's a problem in the country today. You know, I'm sitting here, I've got this on next to me, I've got this computer next to me, I'm talking to you. I've got all these things that go on that distract me. We're stopping ourselves from accomplishing things because we think we're multitasking, and humans can't really do 2 things at once. Is that right?
No, they can't. I mean, that's a learning for me, is that I thought I was this great multitasker, and it holds true for a lot of people. And multitasking is actually, intent is good. We want to beat Father Time, even though Father Time's undefeated. We want to beat the competition. We want to wring more out of our 24 hours. And we think by multitasking, that's how we do it. When in fact, ironically enough, it's the exact opposite. So when we multitask, which is, we're trying to do 2 things at once that are requiring brain power, is that you're using the same part of your brain. You actually are decreasing your efficiency as a team by 40%. Your IQ can drop up to 15 points, which, as my dad always reminds me, hey, that's a lot of points for you, son. You can't afford to lose those 15 points. And it's equivalent to not sleeping for 30. Yeah, it's equivalent to not sleeping for 36 hours. So it sounds like you and I are kindred spirits. In the book, The Focus Project, we talk about 4 spirit animals, and that all of us have tendencies of them, but we're strong and dominant in one spirit animal. And one of those spirit animals is the army ant. The army ant, what we like to do is we like to carry a bunch of stuff at once, just like an army ant can carry 500 times their weight. We can do it, like some individuals can do it. We can carry a lot of weight, but we shouldn't, because when you get to that anthill, it won't fit down into the anthill anyways. And so what I suffer from, and it sounds like you might be the same, is I've got like 8 projects running in parallel, when it'd actually be a lot more efficient to break those 8 up and just focus on one at a time, starting with the most important first, because again, that might remove one of those others down the line if you crush it. And so it's kind of against our DNA as Americans, but it's really a better way to do it, is just focus on one thing at a time and then systematically move through them.
You know, I think the other part that goes into it is understanding, because you mentioned team, and I think that's important, is it's okay to relinquish some control. You mentioned we all want to, we all want that perfect ending, and we thought, okay, boom, this is perfect ending. This is where it should be. Oh my God, why isn't it there? Because we can't accomplish all that on our own. We have to be able to cede some of that responsibility and that decision making to somebody else, even if it's not the way you would do it. It still worked. You have to accept that. How would you feel about that?
No, I agree. It's tough for a lot of us, especially if you're been successful, right? You're reliable, you're dependable. But the beauty of doing a book like this is I get to talk to a lot of thought leaders across the world. And the consistency we started to see was people repeatedly saying, if you want to do it fast, do it yourself. If you want to do it far, you got to do it together.
Yeah.
So to do it yourself in the short term will always be faster and always be better. But if you really want to go far, and this is talking about like both wide and also far in terms of timeline and distance, 101 years, amazing. So you know it better than most, is that you've got to do it together. And that means that the person that's doing it isn't going to do it the same as you. That's fine. There's going to be learnings from that. And also it might be that you're the best at that in the company, but it makes sense to give it to this other person. And it might be at 70% that level, but it doesn't matter. It allows you to focus on something else that's even more important than that one thing. And so it's really about making sure you utilize the team and playing to all their strengths.
No, I would agree. I would tell you that if someone were to, if I'm asked about what makes our company great and makes us as successful as we've been, it's we have a very large diversity of people involved. It's no longer just Pohanka family members. You've got Scott Crabtree, Sandy Fitzgerald, Lenny Gonzalez, Joe Wilkins. You start adding all of these other people into the mix, and they all bring another impact. I mean, Jeff Pohanka, my cousin, does a great job. My son's here. He does a great job. But we all do have different skills and talents. And one, I don't think would be successful. I mean, they all would be successful. I don't want to take that from any of them. But I think their success, our group success, is much better like a hand. If you use it, you can do more. Every finger can do something, but together they can make a fist and they can power things. And that's what makes a difference. And I think that's hard for people to grasp. Going back to where we started this on technology is supposed to bring us leaps in productivity. But in our industry, you still haven't. We've added we've CRM tools, we've added digital tools, we've added chat tools, we've added text tools, but we don't see that great productivity leap. Why is it in certain industries you don't see that versus other industries that can take advantage of technology and see a huge leap in productivity? What is it about let me back that question up a little bit. Mm-hmm. Do you think the digital space will start to see us get that productivity increase?
Let me answer this in two ways, because there's the productivity piece, but I like to use the word friction instead of productivity. And so productivity is important, right? If you're producing cars on the line, you've got robots that could increase the productivity. But there's instances where Flintstones and Jetsons. And so if you look at this company out of Michigan, I grew up outside of Detroit, but this company in Michigan, they sell they're one of the biggest salsa providers in the country. And they started small batch, and they go, we've got to get scale. We've got to increase the productivity so that we can increase our revenue. And they've tried to make the salsa at large batches, and it doesn't taste the same. And so what they've decided is just become more productive and efficient at the small batch level. And so when it comes to technology, the best way to approach something is to manually attack it first to see how it scales, and then try to figure out how to automate it. And so a lot of companies make the mistake of over-investing in the automation before they figure if it actually works. So a lot of companies in artificial intelligence right now that you might buy and use, it's actually all manual right now. Like they'll call it AI because that's their vision, but they're testing it manually. They're just paying a lot of workers to actually automate it. And then they figure out, okay, this kind of works for our customer. Now let's layer in the technology to see if it works. So essentially testing to see if it can scale first with humans, and then you try to automate it. Because sometimes if you're trying to scale the unscalable, again, that sounds anti-American that you'd say anything's not scalable, but you've got to pick the easy winners first and then work your way down the line. So that's why I use that salsa example, because sometimes it just isn't going to work. Now, in terms of the word
it's a great example, though. It's a great example.
Yeah, and then in terms of friction, that's the winners are who removes friction. So Amazon's basically in the removal of friction business, and it's going to go to every business, and it depends on when it's going to come. Like you mentioned, it might come to the automotive business in 20 years, but it's coming. Because as you get used to just opening up your door and going, oh, there's a package here. That's great. I love it. And most importantly, I can send it back. There's no friction. It doesn't cost me anything. So if I get two of the same, I don't know what size this shirt's going to be. So I get this one and that one. And so if you look back like 10 years ago, like 15 years ago, people said no one would buy shoes online. And so when they started Zappos, Tony Hsieh starts Zappos, and people think he's crazy. You got to try the shoe on. Like you have to physically go and try the shoe. He's like, no, I think people's mindset's changing with this other company, Amazon. And so he actually, in order to get shoes, he actually had to buy a retail outlet. And then the manufacturer of the shoes didn't notice that all of a sudden one day one of them said, did we just send 10,000 shoes to that San Francisco store? And then Zappos is away they go, and they get bought for $1 billion from Amazon. Then if you look at 8 years ago, people started to say they're going to buy a $20,000 watch online. It's funny, I was in Africa with this company that owns 16 of these large luxury brands. And it was awesome because I'm in a tent in South Africa, and Tony Hawk was the other speaker. He's one of the most famous skateboarder of all time. Tall guy too, and I'm quite tall. I was sitting by Tony. I go, this is weird. I'm in like South Africa. I can see the silhouette of a lion because we're on this billionaire's property inside Kruger National Park. And then the CEO had the vision. The owner is telling all the other CEOs of the companies he owns, hey, wake up. You're going to be buying, people want to buy these luxury brands online. They're not going to go into not the Maison and buy this luxury brand. And sure enough, he was right. That thing's all shifted in that industry that they're in. But we'll see. Now we're in the pandemic. I've been talking about online voting for 10 years, not at the presidential level. Obviously, everyone talks about the presidential election, but really at the local level, getting to that voting. So they're actually voting on stuff that matters in the local level. So it's just on your phone and says, here's the vote that's coming up. Here's the 60 seconds on this side. Here's the 60 seconds on this side, so that you know what this issue is about, so you can vote on your phone. And now you kind of start, because of the pandemic, you start to see, okay, now I can see the reality of that eventually coming to fruition.
Well, if you're ever ready to go back to Kruger National Park, I'll go. That was I went there. It was an amazing time. Were you at the Getty Estate?
We were at, so I won't disclose this guy's name, but this guy owned the property. He was inside the park.
I've been there.
It might have been.
I wasn't at the Getty.
It might have been.
Yeah.
But that's awesome. Did you see the Big Five? We didn't see the leopard when we were there.
Oh my gosh! I have a picture of a leopard trying to attack us.
Oh gosh.
So, yeah, they parked this Jeep on this hill, and it lowered all of us down, and another truck had gone to the other side, and this leopard was eating, and this leopard didn't appreciate everyone there, so it kind of, I got it. Before I dropped the camera, I have this great picture of the ears back, the teeth out, the tongue, and you know, then you see the next one, the camera going chunk, 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 chunk. So, and then me trying to throw everyone else out of the truck before they got to. So yeah, we did. We saw the cheetah. Saw the cheetah, which was great. So if you want to go back, you let me know. I'm with you. The one thing that I wanted to end with is I want to talk about the power that we have in social media, or we have in the digital space, to create good, because we've heard a lot of the negative. When we start to look at moving where we're going, there is a lot more good that has come out of our interconnectedness that's grown. Where do you see the ability for this to for us to get past the bad to get to more of the good?
Yeah, the beautiful thing is that the good always outnumber the bad. And so to your point, is that the more I understand about other people, not only in the country, but outside of the country, the more we can understand each other. And that's the beauty of these tools, that connectivity, especially when time and distance are an issue, or you're in a pandemic and safety is an issue, that you can't replace face to face. But when you can do what we're doing and have this conversation, or that we can understand people from around the globe, or just at the next county over, the more we understand where the people come from, that's when you get to real kind of the whole harmonious piece of the world. And so it's a beautiful thing when you think about what these tools enable and that openness, so that the countries aren't siloed, so that the states aren't siloed. And keep in mind the news. I mean, if you're in the news, and in these social networks, you are going to put items on there to make money. And what makes them money is solicitous items. It's not anything new. So if it bleeds, it leads. That's what was on the local news in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And it's the social network's best interest, because they are for profit. So they have to increase the profit of their shareholders. And so what they will put on is stuff that causes you to view it longer. So if you don't like it, don't view it, because then they won't put it on there. And so it's just one of those sick little things to understand, that they're going to put, if everyone would stay on and watch unicorns and rainbows, they're going to put unicorns and rainbows on there. But to your point, it's awesome world to live in, that it's the best time to live. It's breaking down barriers. If you actually look at the data, it's actually showing that the world's becoming better together through a lot of this technology. edX.org, Khan Academy. If you have an online connection, and I said at MIT and Harvard, we actually launched edX.org. It's now 10 years old, but now it's exploded because of the pandemic. So if you want a Harvard or MIT education, all you need is an internet connection. That's it. And now everyone has cheap devices. So we're trying to get broadband across the world on making that a reality. But if you can get to a broadband connect, if you get to any connection, then you can get a Harvard, MIT, and over 150 universities are on edX.org. You can get that education for free. What an amazing world to live in. And then when we talk about these digital stamps, I talk about producing and protecting them, because your digital stamp is your reputation. And before, you might be able to influence 5, 20 people. Maybe if you're really popular within your local community, maybe you can influence 150 people. Now, because of the scale, that word of mouth on digital steroids, that socionomic effect, is that now your digital stamp can influence and positively help people 5 seconds from now, as well as 5 years, 50 years, 500 years from today. And so if you're out there posting, hey, I'm helping this local charity right now doing X, Y, and Z, and other people see that and go, I've been wanting to donate my time. That looks amazing. I'm going to join now. And so really take advantage of your digital stamp, because it impacts people 5 seconds from now, as well as 5 weeks, 5 years, 50 years, and 500 years from today.
See, when I hear that, then the other thing that's coming through my mind, and as you keep saying that, is I keep wanting to say the phrase "be original." You've got your glasses on. There's that great trademark for yourself. It's all you. I think that's the other thing that has to be important, is how, transparency. It's your footprint. It's your space. You have to be you. You've got to be original. You can't try to be somebody else. Would you say that's an important part of it as well?
It's huge. And don't do what I did, which was just stepping into my story for 15 years. So you can see me now that I'm on video. I've got these bright green glasses on. My name's Erik Qualman, so first initial, last name's Equalman. And I hated that name. I did. I just didn't like it. People were like, Equalman's here. He can do it. He can do the report over the weekend because he's a superhero. Oh, you want coffee? Who's the fastest here? It's got to be Equalman. He's a superhero. Let him go get the coffee. And so I didn't like it for 15 years. So I was resisting stepping into my story. And then it's funny, you mentioned a cheetah. So I'll give you a super quick story on this, not the long version. So I flew to speak in Kenya, and the night before I was going to adopt a baby cheetah. And on the ride over, the lady I'm with says, hey, and not to take home, my wife would kill me if I brought a cheetah home, but just support the rescue shelter for all these damaged animals. And she goes, hey, the sprinter Usain Bolt was here a couple days ago, and he adopted from the same litter that you're going to adopt from. We'd love to film you like we filmed him and put the footage together and help raise more money. And I said, yeah, whatever it takes, happy to do it. And then she looks at me and she pauses. And then a couple weeks prior to this, they'd taken a magazine, did a cover shoot, and they'd put me in bright green glasses because they liked the name Equal Man. They saw it and said, hey, do you mind wearing some Clark Kent-like glasses? And it's our St. Patrick's Day issue. Do you mind if they're green? And I said, yeah, that's fine. And so the lady looks at me and goes, when we're filming, we really want you to have your green glasses on. And I look at her and I go, I don't wear green glasses like that all the time. I look like an idiot walking around wearing green glasses like that all the time. And then the look on her face just told me what I needed to hear. Basically, I got to step into my story. And so now I've fully stepped into the story. The reason I resisted it, the reason your listeners are resisting it, because it's really uncomfortable to step into your story at first. But once you step fully into it, over time, it's the most comfortable place that you can be. So you're spot on. It's all about step into your story because it's uniquely your story, and it should be uncomfortable, especially when you first step into it. But long-term, it's the most comfortable place you can be, and it's going to have the biggest impact on those around you by just being yourself.
So we're in the last few seconds we have, because I don't want to take up too much of your time. What is the future? You're the futurist. You're ready to tell me the future. If I'm looking at the next big thing or the next things I should be concentrating on, what would that be?
We talked about a little bit. It's really the combination of voice search. So think Alexa or Google Home, and combining that with what they call the sharing or the gig economy. And so what does that look like? What that looks like is you can start to see it now because of the pandemic a little better than you would, say, 9 months ago. It's Alexa, please reorder my groceries and have them shipped to my house at 5 p.m. And please check for any coupons against those groceries. And so Alexa will go in and place that order. And then she'll even recommend, hey, that's funny. I just said her, so she's asking me something.
I heard it, yeah.
Yeah, so she'll even say, hey, it looks like our predictive modeling is showing that you're probably out of mayonnaise as well. Oh yeah, I am. So go ahead and order that too. And so it's a combination of those items. In your space, you can see the hard thing is not to predict the if, the hard thing is the when. So, and no doubt in my mind, there's no question we're going to have mobile voting. The question's not if we're going to have it, the question's when. And that's the hard thing to predict is the timing and also which company is the actual winner in that space. But if you think about in the automobile space, is the same thing could apply. Like I'm one of those people that actually I'm in the minority. I don't like to go to the dealership. I know what car I've test drove. I know what car I want. I'm just trying to figure out who has it in the inventory and, what's the transparent price or what's the best fit. And I usually go back to the dealership that I've created trust with. So those come back to trust. But in terms of technology in the future in that space, the same thing could apply to where Alexa proactively reminds me, or whatever, name your tool of choice on AI, it doesn't matter. Your kind of chief of staff robot reminds you, hey, your lease is due in 5 months. Do you want me to check for lease pull forward programs? Yes, please. Which car do you want? I want this one. Okay, let me go ping around. And it might be a bot chatting to a bot, who knows? But figure out who has the inventory, what's the best fit, and then she comes back with those recommendations. So obviously that's probably a ways away. Again, there's no doubt in my mind that's going to happen. It could be 20, 30 years, it could be 5, we don't know. And so that's where I see it going.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to spend with me. I really do. This has been great. I will tell you, I am, for anyone who doesn't know this story, which no one does because I haven't shared it, but we had a great opportunity to meet you at Nissan when you came to speak, and we sat down and actually had lunch together with everyone else there down, and it was a great time. So I appreciate it. Thank you for reaching out to me about your book, and more importantly, thank you for agreeing to be part of our Christmas tree challenge down the road. I think anyone who listens to you and they know what you do would be well served to take some time with you, like I have today. But thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Take care. Have a good weekend. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here. Me and Erik Qualman talking about the digital space.
Thanks for listening to the Fredericksburg Strong Podcast. Be sure to visit fredericksburgstrong.com to join the conversation, access the show notes, and discover our fantastic bonus content, as well as submit a request for you or your organization to appear on one of our future episodes. See you next time with another exciting episode of Fredericksburg Strong.